for being here. My name is Stephanie Potter. It's good to see you guys virtually at this virtual Zoom poetry reading of Broadstone Books with four of our recent titles. Like I said, my name is Stephanie Potter. I'm a recent partner to Broadstone Books. I joined the company in 2019. Broadstone Books is an independent press based in Frankfort, Kentucky, and that's in the United States. We specialize in poetry, but we also publish a variety of different genres as well. We have 100+ titles. I'm going to be, while we have our poets reading, I'm going to actually post links to their particular page on our website where you can actually purchase their book if you're so inclined to do so. But while you're there, you can also check out our 100+ other titles that we have on our website as well. So we also do a variety of, we also have a gallery, the Jane Chancellor Moore Gallery here in Frankfort. It's part of Broadstone Media. And I think that's about all. Did I miss anything, Larry? This is my very first poetry reading. Like I said earlier, I'm a visual artist and I do a lot of the design work for Broadstone. That's why I was brought on. So how your books look, not what's in them, but the typeset and all that jazz. So that's the kind of stuff I work on. So let's get this show on the road. I'm super excited to hear from all of you all. And like I said earlier, if you've got some, if you want to do a shout out in the chat box to your favorite author, kind of pump them up, that'd be awesome. And let's go. Thanks.
Okay. Am I on? All right, everyone. Hello. This is Larry Moore here, publisher of Broadstone Books. And this is super exciting. This is our first branded Broadstone Books Zoom event. And I first want to thank Susana H for arranging and providing the technical hosting for today's reading. We originally Stephanie and I were supposed to be in New York City today for a live reading at the house, but COVID-19 had other plans. And Susana, being the great literary citizen that she is and supporter of her fellow authors, very generously stepped up to make today's event possible. And as a result, we can now welcome an even larger audience. I know we have some people who have joined us from Europe where it's late at night. So good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you happen to be joining us. And I had said to Susana, the only problem was if she could just manage to Zoom me a Negroni from the bar at Babbo, it would be the perfect day. But I have my drink here in hand, so I'm good to go. Our poets all have very distinguished literary and academic pedigrees, and you can find their bios on the web pages that Stephanie's going to be putting up as we go. And of course, please just visit broadstonebooks.com generally to keep up with what we're doing and who all we're publishing. I'm going to keep my introductions today brief since you can read all that good stuff about the writers. I'm going to tell you a little bit about how each one of them came to publish with us. Susana H. Case started out as one of those authors who got away from us as we missed our shot at her award-winning previous book, Drugstore Blue. Even so, we made her an honorary Broadstoner, and ever since, we've been waiting for a chance to upgrade her membership status. And she's done that in great style now with her new collection, Dead Shark on the End Train, which I think you're all seeing on your screen. I have to say, it was great fun designing the cover of this book. It's a lot of fun. It's appropriate that this book, that the central section of this book, which is called Crime Scenes, describes the work of the forensic pioneer Francis Glessner Lee. For this book itself is an exercise in forensics, or to use a really terrible pun, this is a case study of the violence that's perpetrated against women, people of color, immigrants, marginalized communities of all sorts, which makes it sound really grim, and it's not at all. the best way for you to appreciate the brilliant and breathtaking poetry in this collection is for me to stop talking and to turn the mic over to Susana H. Case.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for getting us all together to do this event. I had bought this dress for the book party last year, and I thought it was going to be a book party in person, and I thought, well, it's a book party, and I'm wearing it, even though I'm sitting in front of my computer. So since you mentioned Frances Glessner Lee, maybe I'll start with a few of her from the central section of the book, which, as Larry said, is inspired by her. She was a early 20th century housewife who, like many in that period, built doll houses. The difference being her doll houses had dead bodies in them. And although she never went to college, she ended up training forensic investigators at Harvard. She learned so much about forensics. So there are prose poems in the central section inspired by her life, and there are regularly in jam poems also in the middle section inspired by the doll houses that she made. So I'm going to read a couple of the prose poems about her life interspersed with a couple of the dollhouse poems. So here's one about her life. Frequenting autopsies to verify the accuracy of her models, Frances Glessner Lee notes the correct amount of bloating among those in her down-at-heel homes and rooms, led astray by desire and vice. Doad, mute yourself, please. Nail polish depicting blood turns purple. She paints dolls, newspapers stuffed into cracks and crushed cigarettes, knits stockings with needles the size of straight pins. 3 crime scenes a year, each as costly as a basic house. Not like her house, genteel, full of antiques, or the one in Santa Barbara to which she sent after her divorce. 8 years is enough to wallow in disgrace. She feels freed instead. Obsessed, she writes, "This has been a lonely and rather terrifying life I have lived." And this is one based on her dollhouse. The dollhouse is called Two-Story Porch. And it's a wood frame house, and it's a working class house with laundry on the porches. And this is the poem I wrote, which is called Small Caliber. Where are you going with a .22 in your hand, showing off your Second Amendment, shooting off your mouth, shooting her struck dumb in the chest, struck dumb boy? He struck her shooting upward from the street, anonymous shot. She on a chair, still in her apron and hairnet, hanging the weekly wash on the 2-story porch, body falling, Sunday morning. Husband, drunk and cantankerous, he could have done it, loose with his hands. He too owns a .22 and a swagger. So I don't know how many of you remember the show CSI, Crime Scene. It's probably still on at 2 in the morning, but this is another one about Frances Glessner Lee, which also is about CSI. In its 7th season premiere, inspired by Glessner Lee's work, the TV show CSI Crime Scene Investigation introduces a character, the miniature serial killer. Natalie Davis, the murderer, leaves a scale model of the crime scene at each kill site or sends it to someone investigating the case. She uses the victim's blood when she needs to represent blood, not the nail polish Glessner Lee used. Every construction in the TV show contains a picture of a bloodied doll. Her first victim was her 4-year-old sister, whom she pushed out of a treehouse. It's the only one of her homicides for which she doesn't create a miniature. So Frances Lee's dioramas or dollhouses went on to inspire a couple of different TV shows as well as CSI, crime scene investigation. So this is the last of the Glessner Lee poems I'm going to read, and then I'm going to move to the other sections of the book. And this is probably the only poem I've ever written from the point of view of a dog, and it's called The Smell of Smoke. I love the nighttime smoke, fuel can in the doorway, the escape through the door only a dog could make. I made my escape. Love the cans of evaporated pet milk left on the table, bread and soup. Love the charred surfaces of the carefully built cabin. Love the cabin, fire in the collapsed bed and bedroom wall, headboard of the bed, intense burn of the uncle who remained in bed, who kicked me repeatedly. Love the necessity of dental records, soot in his trachea. Love the arson. They searched for accelerants on the nephew's clothes and hands. Love the young nephew, my master, lurking outside fully clothed. The argument they had that night, the sinner, if not the sin. So I live in Manhattan on the East River, and both the city and the river sometimes find their way into my poems as a character. And that is the case in this poem, which is titled The East River Isn't Romantic Anymore, which are lyrics from a song called Greenpoint, Greenpoint being a neighborhood in Brooklyn on the other side of the river. The East River isn't romantic anymore. 16 miles of saltwater estuary that can't make up its mind in which direction to nudge the tugboats extends south from the arched bridge at Hellgate. Once a mass of ice got struck, and for a few days, commuters could cross on foot between Brooklyn and Manhattan. They've cleaned up the water from when human waste was dumped, when Harry Houdini performed his first wooden crate escape with shackles and straps. Swimmers practice their strokes from Brooklyn Bridge Park to Manhattan, where the current runs fast. Every year, some jumper drowns. It's where the suicides go, are the lyrics of the rock song. Like the father of a man I once loved, who locked up his dress shop, an arm dangling from the car window, smoked his last Marlboro as he drove down Montgomery Street, never braking. The city's machinery fished out the car, bleeding water, and him, a man who no longer needed to make up his mind. So you're probably wondering around now what the dead shark has to do with anything. So here's the dead shark poem, another New York poem. Dead shark on the N train. Poor brown fish beached at Coney Island, then carried in someone's arms to the roller coaster, where another man thought it beautiful and tried to transport it home, only to abandon it on the subway. And you know how it is in New York City, nothing surprises anyone. The car reeked of dead shark, and passengers took photos debating Instagram filters when the conductor asked everyone to leave and closed off that train. At the end of the line in Queens, a transit worker plastic bagged the body and normalized the car. I fled Queens when I grew up. Like sharks that migrate freely, I traveled to survive, didn't want to reach the end of my line in the same place I started out from, though I ended up just on the other side of the river. When someone on the number 1 had a heart attack and died, his corpse rode the loop from South Ferry to the Bronx and back to South Ferry twice. Like a man in his habitat, he seemed to be napping. Unlike the shark, no one put a Metro card under his fin, his cigarette in his jaws, can of Red Bull by his side for the journey. as that poem says, I traveled to survive. So I'm going to read a couple of poems about travel. This one's called Herds. The men are unloading goats from a boat onto the sandy beach of Paliokara. A few goats escape, run wild through the port, only to be surrounded, tied up, and carted by wheelbarrow into town, while a large pelican sits on the beach wall watching. This happens often, both before and after the refugees arrive, half dead from across the Mediterranean, Somali, Sudanese, Egyptian, Syrian. They've mistaken the island for Italy. Herded into a gym, police paint registration numbers on their arms as they sleep. Names are ignored. We are human. We have names, they complain. There is so little left. In some parts of the world, even the goats have names. And I think I might end by this one because I'm not sure when I started. I think I'm pretty much at the end. This is No Direction Home. As I go uphill from Pokhara to Sarankat for a better view of the Annapurnas, the jewelry changes from elaborate gold earrings, double nose rings through nostril and septum, to single jewels, small plugs with glass inserts. Women have less the higher I go. I stare at them and they stare at me. A mother carrying a baby in a sling reaches toward my breasts, startles me as she touches them and laughs, pointing at her baby. And I too am laughing. I make no sense to them, an American who stumbles about on farm terraces, losing my way. Decades from now, there will be paragliders here, but today there are only villagers and skinny cows. There's no clear trail to follow, and maybe that's a metaphor, or that's just how it is when a place is unfamiliar. I know that to be my own salvation, I have to get down from the mountain before dark, or people will come from their wooden houses to watch the tourist who has fallen to the ground, carrying me inside before I freeze to death in the mountain air. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Susana. Thank you for the wonderful reading, and thank you again for making all of this possible today. So next, it's time to introduce Philip Brady. And I've asked my partner, Sheila, to step into the camera here with me. There she is, okay. The reason for that is when we first received the manuscript for Philip Brady's previous Broadstone book, To Banquet with the Ethiopians, my associate editor and our principal reader, Sheila, asked me for Phil's phone number so she could call him and tell him how much she loved it, which is so far the one time that she's done that. And it's no wonder, because it was a mind-blowing Joycean extravaganza. And by the way, I mean James and not Michael Joyce, will be coming up here in a few minutes. Just of memoir transmuted into myth and epic poetry, which, by the way, Phil can recite from memory, proving that he's not just a poet, but he's a bard. We weren't quite sure what it was.
Yeah, I told him I love it. I have no idea what it is.
Yeah, we didn't know what it was, but we knew we had to publish it. Now we have the privilege of publishing Phil's career-spanning volume of new and selected poetry and prose, The Elsewhere, which will be coming out in early 2021. I like to say that Phil is an Irishman, and thus everything he says is shite, but it's damned interesting, shite. So let's give a listen now to Philip Brady. Come on, Phil.
All right, I'm gonna unmute myself there. Thank you, Larry, Sheila. Thank you, Susana, for this lovely gathering. I'm on the west side right now, so we're close. This is a poem about where I'm from, and it's called Firstborn. The day the four McCann girls were shown Brooklyn and told that beneath their feet were rivers and tunnels, another fleet of trams, a whole underground city. That was the day they realized they'd need me. They could translate pence to nickels. New mince meant raisin. But one look at the brickwork, the smoking girders, one look at their small blue parents inching under the neon storming the sky. And all but the baby sensed they'd need an American, rich, educated, tall if possible. But where to find one? In the grease-japped kitchens, in the kiosks, in the velvet sacristies. On Sundays, paddies in sloped work caps leered at McCann's front stoop. Greasers sharked the boulevards, and Jews, garbed as mad priests, muttered and cawed along the lanes of Prospect Park. But the only way to get an American was to make one. Mary was eldest, so she tried first. She barely had time to squint at the house I'd rent one day with turrets and stained glass windows before the gardener she married, whose tenor voice still trills in McCann memory, died of rare cancer, and their girl child started to grow black, crooked teeth and swipe coins, not like me at all. Then Betty, the prim one, entered the plush mouth of the Savoy movie house. And when she exited, daylight swelled to rubies in her bleary sight. And that night in her pillow, she saw Africa, Bogart's bone-deep American gaze. And she, shimmying in the dream out of her wool skirt, scatting her curls. All that summer she peered back into the plum-white Coney Island, scum-white Coney Island surf. And then this Elizabeth, who stepped over sidewalk cracks and probably steam-ironed her underwear, she fainted, flailing the flexed waves until a navvy flung his shoes in after, and they lived like that, fainting and belting each other, while 40 years skimmed by like a flat stone. And now she's babbling this fractured tale to me, the sea meanwhile having shrunk to a damp senile shell. But she's sure, my aunt, and still furious, that it was me thrashed out of her womb like a knife. I nod, her sure, and when she stiffens, spits out that I fecked off the wrong way to some war and came back as someone else. I steal a glance at my cousin's military snapshot taped to the steel nursing home bed frame and swear that when it comes to this, between myself and me, we'll shoot each other. Then it was Kay who coaxed a wraith by jitterbugging her flame fingernails. Together they raptured bars and KFC halls, then boogied home to make a me Christ would mistake for his transfigured twin. But I'd been craved so many times it came out smudged, their whelp, padding the threadbare rug and orthopedic shoes, soiling his musical necktie in the kitty litter. And that left Anne, the youngest, who dreamt at first of turrets and Bogart, but finally it was the dark she loved, mirrored when she closed her eyes and pulled her man down into it. That was the traveling then, rivers and tunnels, farther than she'd ever dreamed or thought. No fear, no need, and when she looked up, I was gone. For all the scams they'd brooded, I'd slipped back, easy as a hanky through a ring, though it must be a sliver of me's gone into the obscure god who sprays graffiti and huffs black soot onto the crust of Brooklyn, wildly fanning his worshipers back to life. Larry mentions that nobody knows exactly what to banquet with the Ethiopians is. And I think that's part of the problem that we have with poetry, is nobody really knows what the hell it is. It's a terrible paradox, because on the one hand, it's hard to write. It's really kind of difficult. On the other hand, it's supposed to look easy. Yeats puts it this way. He says, a line will take us hours maybe, but if it does not seem a moment's thought, our stitching and unstitching have been naught. Now, this is not a problem that troubles other disciplines, in my view. I mean, nobody thinks physics is easy. Business, dog eat dog, no free lunch. I can even make playing the bodhrán look like steady labor. But for this paradox, I blame Homer. He was the first to publish. He was our first publisher who, took poems out of utterance and put them down as sign. And that's what I was, of course, doing the paradoxical thing. I wrote a book about it, and it's called To Banquet with the Ethiopians. And several of those chapters are included in the Elsewhere, to which, of course, I'm so indebted to Larry and Sheila. So I'm going to share a little snippet from the 7th of 18 chapters. This is the chapter, this is part of a chapter, and it's where Homer meets this new technology, the same kind of thing we're struggling with here with Zoom, press this button and all, and he called it the alphabet. So this chapter is called Redaction, and this is just from the middle of the chapter. And this is how it must have been the morning, after the night of the naked burning girl, when Homer, dazed with longing and lost love, tore open the package, and his house went silent, and his marble eyes opened on a strange horizon. The alphabet. Awkward at first, stuttering so the stylus could keep up. The process, transcription, the manual called it, taxed but soothed too. Nothing like entrancement when each utterance dervished through his rocking torso. No rapture with the alphabet. His loins remained cool, his mouth moist. Triangles, rhomboids, circles, and half circles, hardened into stanzas, passages. Finally, he stepped back from the work desk and squinted at the scarred, translucent scroll. Never before had he seen the Iliad. Never realized its nuance and dimension, till now his version changed with every venue. In palaces he trumpeted Agamemnon, sports events Achilles, weddings Hector and Andromache, the titty bars the Ares bondage scene. He never made it through in a single go. That would take weeks and leave the listeners dead. He never paid heed to any blueprint. Sure, he eavesdropped on the scholiastic gavel. Great gas to hear the junior geezers fret about interpolation and mixed dialects. Does the Iliad portray a Bronze Age or Iron? Does hearing voices mean the primitive corpus callosum failed as of yet to knit hemispheres of the prelapsarian brain? Did Achilles suffer PTSD? Do rhapsodes remember the poem or forget everything else? But the alphabet began to change his mind. No improv, no entrancement. It was hardly verse making at all. An encryption, a visual echo. Scrabbling letters, Homer saw what counted. Wasn't the chant, the many-minded voice, not the rocking or apotheosis. It was triumph and murder, acts of mortal men, not a message from another world or a warped replica of this one with all its tedium and ambiguity. A nape-tingling shoot-'em-up, the world's greatest war novel. With his newfangled Phoenician toy, Homer might give them just that. And I'll end with just one stanza. This is one stanza from the section of new poems, and it's the section, that cycle of new poems is called The Book. And this is from a poem called, I saw that, Larry. I saw that little whiskey being passed there. He's teasing me, telling me I'm going too long here. This little section is from a poem called Compose the Simulacrum. Spinning counterclockwise into the womb. Spirochetes hooking bits of membrane. flensing out of nothing density, flesh clotting everywhere to eye, numbing the prime, naming the blued swole, bloody rags of thingness and damp soul. Swords engorged from the original certify one exile from full null. Thank you. He just passed it right by as if I wasn't going to notice.
All right, I think I'm back with you all now. I don't know anyone that I would want to introduce to follow Phil Brady other than Michael Joyce. When we published Michael Joyce's first Broadstone book, A Hagiography of Heaven and Vicinity, he told us he wanted to come to Kentucky. And come to Kentucky for his book release. And we said we'd be delighted to have him, but that he, shouldn't expect a big turnout, certainly not like the one we're having here online today. But as it turns out, the real reason for the visit was so that his wife, Carolyn, hi, Carolyn, I know you're on with us today, so she could indulge her taste for great Kentucky bourbon. So for Carolyn, I want to show off. I've also got the good stuff here for you. Okay, so I'll be toasting you too with this reading. We had a wonderful few days when they came to visit us here, and not only did we tour the distillery, but we visited a former Shaker community, and we also went to the monastery where Thomas Merton lived and wrote. And that gives you a little sense of the breadth of Michael's interests, which are indeed Catholic in the small c sense as well. His new collection of poetry, Light in Its Commonplace, demonstrates that like light and its corollary shadow that illuminate everything in life, Michael notices everything in life, and he writes about it all in the most dazzling language. We're proud that this is his first reading from his new collection. Let's welcome Michael Joyce.
Here I am. Am I unmuted? Thank you, Larry. And thanks everybody for being here. I just want to say quickly that Larry is a publisher. Can you hear? Yes? Okay. Just want to say quickly that Larry is a publisher in the old style, not a corporation, not a marketing firm linked to a couple editors, but somebody who really cares about writing and poetry and the kinds of things that writing tries to evoke. And so it was really one of the most important moments of our lives when we visited in Kentucky and saw the source of all this. And I'm happy to be here with my fellow Broadstoners, as he calls it. Everybody's identified themselves by their location in the city. I'm just a little north, 80 miles. Just beyond this screen and the black walnuts and the sun coming through the black walnuts outside is the Hudson River. And so some of these poems will come back to the Hudson. The first of them is going to be the title poem, Light in Its Commonplace. As a principal selection, what I pretty much decided to do was to read poems that friends or readers had emailed me about since the book appeared. But this one, of course, is the title, Light in Its Commonplace. Light in its commonplace shares the isolation of flowers, but without the consolations of order, species, differentiation, name, that mark the Siberian iris or the yellow mallow. In this, it's like the idea of God, A single stunted locust illuminated along a forest path, splash of light at its feet, scattered dapple deeper in, tremor of corn tassels, radiant in the low light of evening. Elsewhere, the precise copper oblong stenciled against the dark cabinet in the parlor, its oscillation a signet against despair. Stone palisade glimpsed beyond the river at the edge of the dark corridor between the neighbor's house and the blue arbor vitae, masking the distant hollows, where the Godhead pools in shadow, its bright residue of formlessness, neither object nor extent. The second poem I'm going to read is called, also a poem about light. Light, it's called Light in Its Irresponsibility. And it was a poem that our next door neighbor, the neighbor just beyond that screen, closer to the river, said that she thought kind of accurately captured the kinds of whimsy that light has. The sun pays no mind as it prowls the house, stenciling dark parallel bars upon a white plastic wastebasket. How shadow wraps volume, both a mystery and a commonplace. Gone before long, transient, yet this event has an actual date and time, a duration, the mark lasting approximately X seconds, then reprinted differently upon the tile and bend of chrome pipe under the sink. Then gone again altogether to wherever light goes. Sometimes it moves about the house, like this, for hours, marking objects, spaces, the outstretched hand if let, but that was yesterday. Something that leaves its mark, no less exact or fleeting. Quote, outside delicate snowflakes are slowly falling. She calls up the stairs just now. That now is oscillatory as yesterday. This poem, when dissolves into now, was one that happily the president of Vassar College, Betsy, sent an email to me about when she received her copy, saying it was one that she liked very much, Betsy Bradley. And the poem begins this way. At the moment, the expectation of when dissolves into now, lingers the sleeper, the violet, gone into morning, to winter, regardless, bewildered, stumbling from room to chamber, bivalve, tongue, and lung, a fire, thick with phlegm, phlegein, the Greek for burning, become a river, the river of time, turning into what one has become, magicking, barely erect and blinking, still wet, barely alive, and to do it again and again. Imagine how it is to be oneself over and over each day, learning the names of the days of the week, stop there in the midst of becoming, snowy woods, etc., the dark limb, the sting of a foot still held by sleep, softness of the bedclothes, ghost photography, phosphor, sun rising in the white sky, over alkaline fields, marsh, samphire, sea, purslane, the same sea landscape, curly wave on wave washes gently over the swimmer, heading for the horizon. And this is a poem about the river, called Morning Along the River. The fog that couches itself low along the river drapes the opposite shore, making the small escarpment opposite seem more dramatic than it is. Crows circle the marina. Mourning doves perch on a swaying wire. A man comes up from the river, lugging a gutted striper by the gills. At the boat launch, the sun appears in the eastern sky, white as the moon, a perfect orb, its rim in sharp focus through the remaining veil of mist. Events of this sort recall photographs dating from before the digital. Yet talk of the lyric impulse seems pretentious. Poetics an inadequate account of such a dissipation. the whistler's steps echoless in the gravel. This poem is one that a friend of ours, a neighbor on the other side of the street, our contractor, said that he enjoyed very much. This is for Andy Goodnow. It's untitled. Confusion weighs upon creation. The stars weeping thin yellow milk from a young mother's breasts. Wild mustard midst the ivy and leeks run rampant. The dream biography cannot be sorted out. Full text search returning only asterisks and straight characters. Yoke of sleep falling off with the bedclothes floats away with the river. Along with the river. Contrails. The taste in our mouths, ourselves slowly devouring. Last night we longed for sleep, now long otherwise. The dull consistency of breath, long since given over, counting the minutes first, then returning for seconds. Next poem is one that my brother Brian, who's here with us today, and a good friend of mine from Iowa, Cindy Coggins, both mentioned to me as liking. His Irresolution, the Philosopher. He has stopped, for instance, dining out, except when necessary, by reason of being out of town, a guest, or unable otherwise to feed himself, professing that these events too often substitute for living their lives, whatever that could mean. Now calls his grown children only on occasions or when they've called him, likewise put aside television without really giving it any thought. Yet now where is he? Sitting in this chair, the upholstery shifting under him, the light too dim or strong for what he's reading, something no wiser than the forsaken images, often in fact just another screen than the one that sits empty across the room, making him wonder if he should also put this bright thing aside as well and leave his wife and lap blanket to warm him. And now she comes to sit there asking what he means to do, given that he has put all this unthinking thoughtlessly beside. He cannot see past her, and yet unsettled, he struggles as if there were something to spy beyond the pale, smooth surface of ice along the river, gilt with the setting sun, dully floating toward the sea, matte shadows where specters used to be. This next poem is called What She Teaches, and I'm going to begin with the epigraph. I'm going to read the epigraph in my awful French, so please pardon me. This is a real instance of pardon my French. Elle lui apprend à pêcher, à faire du feu, à aimer, à partir sans se retourner. That's from the Chercheur d'Or from Violet Plesio. He's always been so. The deep scent along the river in the night, skunks and deer watching soundlessly from the darkened lawns, and on the way back up the hill, intoxicated by the honeysuckle, seeing the moon there, a veiled half circle in the eastern sky, golden light of a single bulb in the kitchen of the house where she sleeps. Nocturnal creatures going about their business, love among them. The eventuality of leaving unspoken for now, the room spinning as he slides into the bed, while below ancient sturgeon cruise along the silk bottom of the channel off Diamond Reef. This next poem is called Three, and it's also one that Betsy Bradley mentioned to me. The intimacy of the number three is counterintuitive. 3 stone steps mottled with lichen and moss lead up the slope, in the sense that taking these steps is to intersect an imaginary gradient, a tangent vector to the earth and yet of it. Quote, where the position of a point is said to be specified by 3 numbers, end quote. Likewise, where each of you at this moment and the next, as well as giving over your names for values. Azimuth, for instance, from the Arab asumad, plural of asamt, the path. The plural here crucial in the root sense, a crossing of a thing known as the world, on which you climb along one side of the shade bed with hostas, the other in sun, shaded by a white canvas pavilion. This next poem is called The Cartographer, and it's for Carolyn. That night, she draws a line between them, starting at the temple where it presses against the pulse in his neck, then wriggling in the embrace as in a tightly knit sweater, carves the line between her breast and his heart. A crimson string continues across the horizon of their bellies to their centers, mouse and nest in slumber. In easy run then, along thigh and calf, an arabesque at the ankle, then the question of which terminus, at the small shrub where the toes branch and blossom, ivory in the dark. And this poem is titled July Evening, and it's in memory of Megan Feldmeyer, a former student of mine. I look out while she deadheads the garden flowers and recite to myself the names of the dead. My mother, my father, my brother who died last year, the sister who died before I was born, my ex-wife's twin sister and brother, my wife's sister, her mother, father, ex-mother and father-in-law, and their daughter, her first stillborn child, the wives of my friends in Paris and Philadelphia, the woman weekender just down the street who gave us the irises, the dead in the old Presbyterian cemetery on the hill beyond town, whose stones have fallen or are worn to illegibility and overgrown with weedy vines, even though our dying neighbor cuts them back. Meanwhile, the storm clouds pass slowly east and north of here, twilight now pink against lavender to the west beyond the river. A few stray drops bead into jewels upon the iPad screen, smearing into a pearlescent trail beneath my finger. Fireflies rise high into the canopy of black walnut. As having come in from the outside, she fixes gin and tonics with Tanqueray and freshly squeezed lime, ice like dull chimes in the perspiring glasses, dusky scent of juniper. And the last poem I'm going to read is also entitled, my friend, the poet Don Beagle, wrote me a wonderful email about this poem. She wakes from a dream in which she says I was crying. When I wake to find her, wide-eyed in the milky light, her profile a pale porcelain cameo paired with mine now, this morning, in this light, after how many years of these crossings. We think we are heading southward toward Capricorn, increase of light residing there for now, sun billowing above the hiss of the hull in southern waters. But we know better in this northern morning, fixed as two graven figures upon the thin shell of a catafalque. Of the varieties of white marble, the Pentelicon, oyster white with pale blue veins beneath, takes the most human form, despite its other name, the Dionys. Her breast seems to me like this, a refuge on this uncertain morning when I've traveled into distant dreams, a stranger, even to myself, weeping for something lost or promised. It does no good to ask, am I the shadow or the gnomon, the dreamed one or the dreamer's consort, whose tears have cost her this last hour of darkness before the short span of the far star already turning homeward. Thank you.
Oh my goodness, Michael. What a wonderful, powerful reading. I like to say of Michael Joyce that he's one of those writers that if it were necessary to recreate all of civilization from a book or books, Michael's one of those people I would turn to because there's just so much contained in his work. So thank you very much for that powerful reading today. And now we come to a very special part of this event. Back in February, completely on a whim, I made an overnight visit to New York City. And thank goodness I did, because it was about the last moment that I could safely have done so. While I was there, I had lunch with Susana, and our great friend and fellow Broadstoner, Lynn McGee, who was with us up until just a few moments ago. So sorry that I can't wave to Lynn right now. But while I was lunching with them, I mentioned that I was seeking to diversify the authors that we publish, something I'm proud to say that we've definitely accomplished this year. And Susana mentioned that she had an author in mind for us. And it wasn't but a few weeks later that I first heard from Mervyn Taylor. He submitted a sample of poetry from his collection, Country of Warm Snow. And in rather a repeat of the experience we'd had with Susana's previous book, that book was snapped up by another press before we could grab it. But I told Mervyn that I hoped that we would have the opportunity to work together on another book. And he told me, well, he was already writing some poems about the pandemic. Well, of course, so was every other poet in the world. But something told me, as Jennifer Franklin, and hi, Jennifer, she's on with us today, as she pointed out in her wonderful blurb for Mervyn's book, Mervyn's are the Corona poems that we're going to be reading for years to come. Sooner than I think either of us expected, he had a chapbook that was ready to go, and we're thrilled to be officially releasing it today. And even better, and Susana, I don't know if you're aware of this, it turns out today is Black Poetry Day, the anniversary of the birth of Jupiter Hammond, who was the first published Black poet born in what would become the United States. So coming to us today all the way from Trinidad, and I'm going to reach behind Sheila here, since I've been showing off my collection of other bottles, Mervyn, I want you to know that I've saved the last little bit of my Royal Oak Trinidadian rum to drink in celebration of your book coming out today. So this is the little bit I have left from my visit to Trinidad.
Wonderful.
So it is, and Sheila says hi as well. So it is our very great privilege to introduce Mervyn Taylor and News of the Living.
Thank you so much, Larry. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay, Susana?
You're breaking up a little, but yeah.
I'm breaking up a little. Oh boy, forgive me. Anyway, Larry, thank you so much. And I'm happy to be a Broadstoner, although that word itself carries all kinds of connotations. Broadstoner, yeah. So, you know, when this pandemic hit, and I was here for the carnival, and then right after the carnival, March, April, here comes news of the virus. And so everybody had to sort of shelter in place, as they say. And it was while I was here over and over, you know, people were trying to get out before they closed the borders. And then I didn't. I thought I would be fine. And so from that point on, I kept hearing, oh, you're stuck down there, you're stuck. And I so much wanted to assure people that I was not stuck, that I am at home, actually. So this first poem deals with answering that whole thing.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's someone in the chat, Kimiko, suggested if you turn off your video, you'll have better audio.
If I turn off the video?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, is that better? Is that any better? No, you can't hear me at all.
No, sorry, it's not any better, so we might as well see you. Oh, someone says it is better, so maybe keep it off.
Keep it off? Okay, all right. Okay, I'm sorry. I'll do my best. Corona song. This is the dying season. Everyone confined to his house. Children at the window singing an old folk song. Every time you pass, you tickle me. Their faces are bright, like the sun over the savannah, where huts and tents from carnival wait to be dismantled till festival time next year. By then, I should have finished my own calypso, and my voice should have returned as strong as ever, thanks to the air, thanks to these hills. So that's my answer about not being locked down, about being where I am supposed to be at this moment. Lockdown in South Africa, every day we were stopped and asked to show our pass. Isolation is not new to us. We've been locked down a long time. How, because of him, the hospital has to treat us. Our sons and daughters work there. They help the sick. They help turn the sick face down. All the patients, plastic covers under the doctor's shoes, the bin in the far corner overflowing. Since I should try closing some
Do you
applications.
have other applications open on your computer?
No, I don't think so, no.
Email or anything? Okay,
No.
okay.
Is it really terrible you can't hear me at all? Can you hear me at all?
Yes, we can hear you at all, but I'm wondering if we should all turn off our video, the rest of us. Let's all turn off our video, because I think then it will be more, yeah, okay. So we're gonna all do that right now, okay? Okay.
Can you hear me okay now? Is that better?
Yeah, go ahead.
Is that better, Susana?
Yes.
Day of the virus. It's funny, during this pandemic, every time you go out, you know, on simple tasks, just to the supermarket or just for a walk, each one of these becomes an adventure during this time. It's an exciting moment just to go to the supermarket. So on this particular day, I went to one a little further away from home, and this was my adventure. I happened to walk by a house with a garden, a very sheltered garden, and there were children. I could hear their voices. So a day of the virus. Behind the wall, small voices. Children play unseen in an overgrown garden, paving stones leading to a closed gate. They remind me that this curfew is temporary. Except from the madman who walks into the grocery shouting the things that are on his list. Bread, Vienna sausage his mother fixed before she passed. The wall around the garden is high. Their game is magical. Lilies for hearts. They swash and buckle, have tea under an almond's broad leaves. Sheltered from the disease now plaguing the world, they sip and use adult words like devastation. And this is the title poem. So now I'm seeing a note that says my speaker is not working. Can you hear me at all, Susana?
Yes, there's still a lot of interference, but it's better with the videos off a little better. Yeah.
Okay.
Susana, why don't you read it?
Okay, Susana. News of the living. Where's Lita, that I may greet and hug her, her arms, her face white with flour? She's been baking all day to help her son with the business. Is the shop flourishing? The autistic grandchild, is he doing well? I can't think whom else to inquire after except Dudley, who long ago retired into himself, drew the covers up to his chin as if he knew this day was coming. Ah, Lita, I know you're holding them all above water while the floodgates of this virus open all around us. You'll convert your house into boat, kitchen into galley, beds into rafts, blowing into the sails till your air runs out, and then fanning with your apron, fanning. I heard this news on the news one day about a woman who had been in jail for some 50 years in Louisiana. And she was trying to get a parole, be paroled or get a pardon, and nothing was working. The title of the poem is She Sings in the Shower. Now, in the 50th year of her sentence, Gloria W., who tried when she was 16 to rob a store with her son's toy gun, has appealed to the governor again. But he has no time. The pandemic is spreading all over Louisiana. So she sings in the shower, a song about a colored girl escaping through the bayous, her child slung across her back, and imagines her cellmates are all grandchildren, listening to her story about snakes and gators and the virus she caught in the swamps one time. Corona City. Your buildings stand tall and empty, wind blowing through windows, down corridors into deserted rooms. In your parks where couples used to sprawl, waiting for musicians to play, ducks and geese fill the rotundas, not a jogger or black boys who once stood accused, rounding any of the bends. Trees hang listless, flowers bloom wild. Here's your empire shred to ruin, neither flood nor fire to blame. A fuzz of a virus clambered into sinuses, guarded by useless turrets, slipped into subway cars, stalled in tunnels, rails humming with unused current. And high in the lookouts of trade centers and skyscrapers, sensors scan for planes that never come. And maybe just two more. Susana, how am I doing?
It's much clearer. It's much better.
Okay. When you don't know what to do, animals lie quietly on a branch or in their lair, feeling the quake long before we do, waiting for the trees to stop shaking, sheltering under fruit and stones, their furniture. Last night, the call that an ex's dad was experiencing breathing problems made me want to scurry under the bed into the doghouse, telling the mutt to move over. The nurse in emergency will help. Tell her I gave you her name. She helped a friend remove his catheter once, keeping his secret to herself. It will be hard to tell her apart from the other green uniforms, the masks, the shoes that squeak on the tiles, the busy, sanitized hands. Call to let me know how it went, if the old man is breathing on his own. I'll untangle myself from the dog blanket, go sheepishly into the house, apologize for the crisis, for not knowing what to do. Small wars for Keith. After this battle with COVID-19, we must still fight smaller wars, walk with the cancer patient to chemo appointments, Go to the dialysis room where we witness the weekly transfer of blood. Come with hearts broken when we ask Black men who shoot each other, do you not see ghosts swinging from trees? And when our friend goes out on these city streets in his bathrobe, we are the ones to bring him home amid the protests and profiling, who must stay among the imaginary guests in his room till morning when he feels free to breathe again. Thank you so much, and I apologize for the transmission.
I think we can all put our videos on and our voices on too.
Yes, and let us thank Mervyn particularly. It's a pity that that some of the reading broke up, but I can't help but say in a way that's in keeping with the difficulty that this year has been for everyone, and speaks to the very situation that Mervyn's written about so powerfully. And the publisher in me has to say, if you missed a few lines of his wonderful poems, then buy his book so that you can read them and fill in the gaps. But Mervyn, thank you, and let's thank all of our readers at this point. If any of you want to turn on, I think Stephanie, have we turned on the mic so that people can clap and yell enthusiastically?
I will unmute everyone.
All right.
Everybody's unmuted.
Bravo!
Well done.
Bravissimo. Bravissimi.
Thank you. Thank you.
Check out the books. I have put links to the books in the chat. Check that out.
I'm gonna call you back. I'm on a Zoom call right now, okay?
Thank you.
Just you. You will.